We were burning up in the heat, and now it's raining. Weather around here is just very finicky, but these tarps work great for the rain as well. That's my head pressure. Subcooler is still going good. We're at 27 pounds on that cylinder. Gosh. I've got a digital gauge on this thing, so I'm not recovering past zero, so don't worry about that. One thing I've been liking on this manifold, if I can get it out of here. Been doubling up my yellow hose with the coupler. So not only do you have a spare hose with you for your recovery, but it gives you a lot of extra reach, and it really doesn't get in the way that bad. I typically keep it tucked right in there. What else? Oh, on my oil pump, I've got these adapters so I can keep them capped off, and I also run the hoses together. Let's see, onto a piece of copper, and that'll keep the so if you got the hoses on, you can just connect them together, and if you don't, you can cap them. I've got both of these adapted from whatever they are. I think that's 1/2 inch and that's 3/8 to quarter. That'll go all the way up to quarter. I have the 3/8 on there now because it's a lot easier to draw oil through a bigger hose. I want to show how to calibrate these analog gauges. So you can use a jug of refrigerant, but the tricky thing with that is it can be hard to get an accurate temperature on a jug unless you leave it like in the basement for a couple days or something like that. But even then, you're probably dealing with more error than you would just using a digital gauge. So you can see that this one is off about 10 PSI. One thing you don't want to do, these screws are not for setting zero. It is not so you can zero your needle, because what you will find a lot of times is once you calibrate these gauges, the needle doesn't exactly go to zero. What you want to do is calibrate the gauge for an actual working pressure. I have both of these calibrated now, and as you can see, by the way, a good standard for reading a gauge is just to get this pin square on. You don't want to look at your gauge at an angle where you can see this pin at an angle. See that, how we're square on now with that pin? So you can see I'm off zero on both of these gauges, but they are calibrated to these field piece, which I know are accurate. One thing I like to do, especially on a system this size, I pretty much do it on every system, but especially a system like this. When I'm putting in my nitrogen, I'm only going to go up to like 50 PSI just to do a general kind of leak check on the brazing before I go dumping a bunch of nitrogen in there, because I really don't want to take 300 PSI worth of nitrogen out of this system. You know, this could have been a bad braze or it could have been a crack. It was really hard to tell. I don't like brazing over cracks, you know, because there is a risk that it can crack again, but that's pretty much my only option here. And what I try to do when I do that is get it real nice and hot and go around there and seal the crack, and then when it's cooler, I'll try to build the braze up to stabilize it, almost make like a little fillet there. So it's looking like we got it. I'm going to increase the pressure. We had a eyelet rip out yesterday because it was really windy. So one thing you can do is just throw something in here. I got a few sheet metal screws, and then just use a zip tie to hold it like that and have a loop, and we tied it off that way. But now I'm gonna, by the way, I really like these for cutting zip ties, especially off a wiring harnesses. But now we're gonna fix it. These little kits here are really inexpensive. The only thing you have to do is sharpen the punch. See? Just gonna fold it like that to get a double layer. Go that way. Put that one on top, just take your punch. You can see, turns out pretty nice, but I showed using the tarp and everything, so I figured I should probably show repairing it as well, because they do take a beating on windy days, but doubling it up like that should be even better than the way it came from the factory. So I figured I probably shouldn't have mentioned sharpening this thing and then not show anything about how to do that. And this works for punches and anything. There's a couple different ways to do it, but like out in the field, this is how I would do it. So you can either find a socket that fits real close over top of this, and then put some electrical tape on it and then shove the socket on there, or a lot of times I'll keep sharp stuff like this in a vinyl tube, and that will also work for spinning it so that you can sharpen it. So if I were to sharpen this out in the field, this is how I would do it. Just take sand cloth here, and it's a little tricky, and you know, be careful you don't cut yourself, but just gonna kind of cup the tip there, get it going until it's balanced, and kind of kind of tilt up into it at the proper angle. And then what you're gonna need to do, you might want to polish it a little bit with Scotch-Brite. What you're gonna need to do then is take a knife or something, because when you really get this thing sharp, you're gonna have a burr in here. Just go around that, and then this is sharp enough now to where, you know, it's able to skin off like fingernail. You don't want it too sharp that it, you know, the edge starts to chip or whatever, but that's very, very sharp. That'll cut right through a tarp. So that's how you sharpen something round like that. I really like these Knipex plier wrenches, and this is the one I probably use the most. It's also the best one for putting in your tool bag, kind of the perfect size. But this service valve here is a bigger size than a normal service wrench has. So, you know, what's really great about these plier wrenches is just the way that they ratchet, and they're almost as fast as a regular service wrench, so it's not a big deal to have to deal with some of these big valves. You have to, I loosen the packing to prevent the packing from being damaged, so that's all that is. I'll tighten it back up once I get closed. Cutting real small pieces of tubing, it can be really hard to grip those and cut them. A lot of times it just spins in your hand. Flaring block works good, but even something like a Brillo pad, grab it, a little piece of sand cloth. That's one way to do that. I'm going to put some of these eye bolts in these holes here, and I really like this for taps. This is made by IRWIN, and I think they come in a set, so this is the bigger one. The only thing that I've found though is that you kind of have to, I use my Knipex plier wrench, you know, something that's not really aggressive, just to snug it up. It needs to be a little tighter than hand tight, or they tend to loosen up as you're using them, but really handy to put that on a ratchet.